Welcome back to the Leadership Growth Blueprint podcast. Today's guest is Greg Stevens, leadership coach, master trainer, professional mediator, and founder of Alignment Resources. Greg helps leaders navigate complex, high stakes conversations and restore relationships that feel impossible to fix. Through his breakthrough master teams consulting work and his book, Build New Bridges, he equips organizations to resolve conflict at the root and create alignment where tension once lived. If you ever struggle with unresolved leadership dynamics, this conversation is for you. Greg, welcome to the show.
Jordan, thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Greg, how would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about you for the first time?
Well, I help leaders become super communicators, especially under high stakes, high pressure situations. And I help them with their people problems, relieve that stress, deal with the issues, and deal with them in an effective way where they actually can solve the issue and build the relationship at the same time.
I'm really excited to dive into the frameworks and the methods that you utilize to help leaders and executives. But before we dive into that, I kind of want the origin story. So what originally led you into performance psychology? Or I guess, was there a moment within your timeline that clarified this path for you?
Well, my career found me. I wasn't looking to do this. I was actually hiring a life coach myself, and I had a successful sales career. I was looking at doing some other things, and I hired a life coach. And through the process, I thought was going one direction, and I didn't really like where it was going. And so I told my life coach, and he said, "Greg, have you ever thought about doing what I do?" And this is back in 1997, 98, early 97, I think it was. And I said, "No, I've never thought about doing what you do. I didn't want to speak in public. I knew that's something I'd never thought about it." And then something flashed back when I was a kid. I remember thinking, I just want to help people get along in the world, and had no idea it would come to this. He was teaching a man woman relationship class, and I thought what he did was interesting. He said, "I think if you did what I did, you'd be great at it." And so I did a true apprenticeship back in the day. I didn't do something online. I actually worked with a coach each week and worked with him and produced courses for him, paid him, did all of this work. And after a couple of years, I went out on my own. But I'd done the work. I'd coached between probably 1,500 to 2,000 hours myself for free, and producing courses. Then I got in, I was teaching man-woman relationship classes and doing coaching. And then I ran into a group that had this class called Path the Dialogue. And so I went to Dallas, took the class, and it made a difference for me. And I asked the people who trained it, I said, could I actually begin to teach this? And they allowed me to come on as one of their associates. Later, they upgraded the program to be called Dialogue Smarts. Then they wrote the New York Times bestseller, Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. So I was one of the first 10 master trainers with the group. And I was with them from 2001 until last year, January of 2005. I mean, 2025. Sorry. A lot of years gone by. And then I wrote my book. And what I found when I taught the skill sets, I would teach crucial conversations, and people had such breakthroughs. It's a great training program, the best on the market, I believe. And they would have breakthroughs, and I'd see them for a follow-up class 3 months later. And then people said, well, I don't remember much. And what I realized was people would have breakthroughs in training. They'd see the world in a completely different way, but no breakthrough has permanence unless you have practice.
Mm.
And that's what I do now is I work with teams and executives, and we do a consistent practice. And I found I've been able to break it down to about 20 weeks. We do it over a 6-month program. But if you stick with me that 20 weeks, you do the work, you'll be able to handle conflicts like you've never handled before. And I consistently hear that people have a different way of handling conversations. They're better leaders, they're better parents, better husbands and wives. So all of these things that's the work I do, but I live in the area of where conflict lives. And I also do what's called team mediations, where we get people together. I'm a professional mediator, but I don't like doing the legal stuff. But I found most teams can't move forward until they really talk it out. There's a lot of team building efforts, which are great. But if you can't talk through the issues after you leave that team building efforts, it's really kind of a waste of time and money. But if you teach people how to talk through those, you actually get a refund on your money over and over and over. It's a true investment.
Thanks for those insights. And it is a bit unfortunate, but very, very true and accurate. Some of the biggest breakthroughs I've had is through live seminars or reading a personal development book. However, after about a week or so, I tend to slip right back into old patterns and old habits. And that's where the unfortunate part comes in. I feel like this is exactly the true value and asset of having a leadership or an executive coach is because not only do you get the self-help book or the live seminar, but you get a continuation of the self-help book and a personal guide, a personal mentor to ensure you're staying on the path. Now, in regards to these frameworks and breakthroughs, can you give us a high-level example of just one framework you like to utilize in a high-stakes, high-pressure situation?
Well, do you want an example of a story that's happened or what actual skill set that I'll teach? Because two different questions there.
I think I think the example, the story might be able to help us understand the framework, but
Yeah.
then you could elaborate as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I find one of the hardest things because people will ask me to come in and do a team mediation. And I have to go through a process of that. And these people haven't learned all the skill sets yet. So I have to deal with kid gloves and deal with people. But the process is I do personal interviews. We have a team meeting and then we come back and I give them time to have some of those conversations together. Then we come back and have a closed door session. But during that, I have to create a space where we create psychological safety for everyone. And my goal when I do a team mediation, it's not anyone gets their way. My real goal is that everyone leaves whole and complete. Now, people may afterwards say, you know what, this really isn't the place for me now because many times people don't want open communication. It's many times the people are hiding out on teams. They don't want to be held accountable. And what I found is the best teams are the leaders not holding people accountable. It's the team holding each other accountable. But they
Mm.
have to learn how to do that. It's not a skill that comes naturally. And it's interesting because there's a book by Scott Peck. It's called Road Less Traveled. And it's so old. And I was re-listening to it the other day. And he said, yeah, this stuff is not natural, but it's not natural to go to the bathroom naturally. Most people poop their pants when they're children. So they have to learn. And just like that, I'd say in a lot of teams, we have people throwing emotional crap everywhere. They haven't learned how to manage that. It's not natural to do this, but when you learn it, things can get cleaned up pretty quick.
That is so interesting how you say that. I feel like the highest performing cultures that I've been a part of, some have been sales, some have been through sports. It wasn't the coach holding us accountable. He didn't have to say anything at all, really. He was just there to more so steer the boat, act like the captain. But it was the teammates, it was the colleagues, the other sales reps within the company that were really holding each other accountable. And I thought that was it was a great culture. And I feel like when a company can operate within that high performance environment, it unlocks a whole new level of growth. What do you feel like? I guess let me propose this question. I think it would be difficult to hold your team accountable if I'm a teammate amongst a team, if I don't hold myself accountable, right? Because how can I expect the best out of somebody else when I'm not even giving my best effort? So, how do you coach that individual become a better version of himself, essentially?
Well, I talk about it. I work with leaders, and leaders lead. What does that mean? People say, "Oh, they have to have followers." No, they have to go first. That's the biggest thing. If I go first, they're either going to follow or not. But they're not going to follow if I'm just trying. I'm going around. I guess we do have a lot of leaders that are they're a position, they're a title, but they don't inspire real growth or true alignment, because what I typically find is if I'm constantly have to look to hold you accountable, there's an issue with that. There's a great book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. You don't hold people accountable, people take accountability. That's
Mm,
just it. Do you have the right people on the team, and are you having the right conversations to weed some of those out? Are you creating a team where everyone gets uncomfortable for people not to take accountability? That's what I was talking about. Where people, you don't have to fire them; they will leave on their own. It gets
yes, they was
uncomfortable, but you have to teach them how to have those conversations to do it effectively. Because if we don't have the skill sets, we damage those relationships and it becomes toxic. And it doesn't become toxic typically after one conversation. It's a multitude that have built up where people aren't dealing with the real issues.
Can you describe a toxic work environment for someone that might be in it right now? Yeah.
Well, I I had an executive team recently. I did one of my mediation programs with very toxic, and it was just ugly. And when I say toxic and ugly, it's like people creating division throughout the organization, wanting them to follow them rather than the organization, doubting and questioning each other at every executive turn, conflict over and over, and then people not talking about it and things not happening for a long time because these were undiscussable, or if we did, we broke into silence or yelling at each other. Toxic environment. No one wants to be a part of it. No one is enjoying their job. And this is the executive team. It's interesting, but when we had the conversation, when we had the breakthrough in my team mediation, we had a huge breakthrough. And one of the leaders stepped up and said, "You know what? I'm responsible for this." And it was so good because before I had to talk to him and say, "I don't trust where you're taking the organization." I had to tell him that.
Mm.
I don't trust you because of these things. Because of these things, I don't trust you. And that was about a week before we did the mediation. And I think one of the things I found, honesty builds trust. And for me being honest and things, what happened is he owned it in that meeting, cleaned up everything. And after the meeting, I stopped. I said, "Thank you for the breakthrough because it wouldn't have happened had you not done it." I wanted to acknowledge him, and I looked at him in front of everyone. I said, "I do trust you now." Because what he went through was very difficult. But it's interesting because the CEO at dinner that night, he leaned over. He said, "Greg, you moved our organization forward 1 year and 1 day today." And that was huge because it was like, but that wasn't an easy place to get to. It took some time to get there. You don't just jump in and have that conversation. You've got to build up to have that. And it took about a 2 month time frame to do that. But again, we leap forward a year. That's a good investment. 2 months to move forward 12.
No, 100%. Absolutely. And in regards to creating that high performance environment, how would you convey that for someone that isn't right now operating at a super high level or high performance culture? What's like the first step that they should do?
Well, start at the basics. Most people don't even start at the basics. They try to have all these conversations, they get emotional. Get to the basics. The core issue is, where's trust? Where's respect? Where's our common purpose? Let's get back to that. Let's talk about what respect looks like with the group. Are we committed to doing that? Because all of these other things are going to need to be discussed. And if I don't have that foundational conversation, I'm going to be on quicksand when I try to have these conversations later. But
Mm.
if I get agreement and lined up and we talk about what respect looks like, what our agreements are, how do we set agreements rather than making assumptions? And when we set up agreements, we begin to start to work our team, live as a team. What we're doing is we're actually living by our commitments rather than our feelings. Huge difference. But typically our feelings get hurt or we start complaining to other people. We're not talking directly to the person. All of these things happen because people don't have the skill set or know how to do what we're talking about. Why would I
Right.
ever want to have one of these difficult conversations if I don't know how to create psychological safety? I don't know how to manage my own emotions. I don't know how to structure my message. I learned to communicate from how my parents did, and they yelled at each other all the time. So if I do that, it's going to have an effect in what I'm doing. And it really comes down for each person. It's called self mastery. How do I manage myself? I have a quote I use nearly every podcast, nearly every time I teach. Everything in my life I create, promote, or allow. So as a leader, I've created, promoted, allowed the exact results that I've got. If I'm complaining in the group, I created, promoted, or allowed it to continue. That's on me. What happens when I start setting boundaries and graciously helping teach people those boundaries rather than shutting them down because they should have understood my imaginary boundary that I never discussed with them, but they need to know what I'm thinking? That's insane. But that's what we ended up doing because we don't know how to even start at the basic foundational piece. And most people wait till there's a problem before they begin talking about the real issues. And they typically don't even get on the right topic about the real issues. It usually comes down to relationship issues.
Such good insights right there. No, thank you so much, Greg. When you think about all the teams that you've, consulted with or coached and mentored over the past few years, and with trends in AI and new relationship and communication problems, I suppose, what do you foresee becoming the biggest challenge going forward over the next 1 to 3 years in regards to
Well,
leadership?
I love AI. AI is going it will help us in so many ways. But I don't think it's just but it's also it's not just AI, it's technology, it's all that. It's we're splintered. People live in a relationship in their head. That's one of the things I met my wife on an online dating thing, and we've been married 5 years now. Great relationship. It's her birthday today, by the way. And I love my relationship. And when we first met, online, I always had a rule that I need to talk to someone because I want you to think about this. And a lot of people meet online. It's great. But until you meet that person and you talk directly to them, you are not engaging with that person. You're engaging with your idea of who you think that person is based on the text they sent you. You don't
That is
know.
so true. My gosh.
You are in a relationship of one until you meet them. Sorry, that's the way it is. I'm reading this. Now, guess what? You can connect really well with people like that. But what happens when the difficulties and pressures of life come on if we're just texting? Well, that doesn't feel good. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. All of a sudden, you don't know how to communicate to those things. So I'm going to suggest going away from the things in many ways that we need to know how to engage with people. And it would be easier just to text it. But what you're going to find is AI will never be emotional. It may feign that. You're the one who's emotional around it, though.
It's interesting because I feel like emotions play such a vital role in how can I like just being a human, right? I
Absolutely.
feel like
That's who we are.
they like if we listen to our emotions, sometimes they warn us, sometimes they help us prosper. But if you really think about it from a growth perspective and a communication perspective, sometimes emotions get in the way. I might go for it. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
No, no, you're exactly right. They get in the way because we don't understand our own emotions. Here's the thing, either you are running your emotions or your emotions are running you. That's the distinction, and if you don't understand that, you will always be run by your emotions because emotions always trump logic. I'll
Yes.
see people in a conversation and in a meeting, it becomes emotional, and both parties are doubling down on their logic. Well, nothing's being understood and grasped from the other person. I agree with you. I think emotions I think they're necessary. They are. But here's the thing, it's interesting. I heard, I think maybe it's John Maxwell said, the ego is important. The ego is a great servant. It's a terrible master. And when we start to understand where our emotions come from and our egos and all of that, and we have what's called self mastery, we're able to manage that. Then we become in charge of our lives. We have a place of choice. I believe the greatest thing we have is choice. But what happens when you're in reaction? Choice is gone. You're in reaction. It's the animal world. That's the thing that doesn't work. Animals poop their pants or whatever. If you put pants, they're going to do that. How do we understand how to get emotionally cleaned up? How do we do that? And that's just it. In my book, I talk about the literacy rate back in, I think 1200s was like less than 1%. And now it's at like 87% in literacy. I want you to think about emotional literacy.
Mm.
Emotional literacy today, I would say, hovers around 1% in the world. And but Back then, they couldn't think of a world with 85% of the people being literate. Guess what? We're here. I believe the same thing can happen with emotional literacy, but we have to pay attention to it. We have to teach people to do it. We have to teach people to do those things. The alphabet of it, how to put sentences together, the rules of all those need to be understood. Then you got to apply them.
Mm.
It takes time and effort.
Absolutely, absolutely. On the topic of your book, do you have any other frameworks or methods that you want to share with us? Any insights from the book?
Well, in the book, I talk about it's called Build New Bridges, the art of restoring impossible relationships. And impossible relationship is one where you think the other person cannot be engaged with because of something that happened. And usually, what preceded you to think it's impossible, first, you have evidence that a conversation went poorly. So I've got the evidence about it. Both parties went to explosive emotions. And when I say explosive emotions, either shutting down or going on the attack. Okay, either one, but and neither party has the skill set. It's interesting when you start to understand this. If one party has the skill set, you can actually get through an impossible relationship, or impossible conversation. But one party, at least one, has to have the skill sets. Typically, if you don't, you're going to get really lucky, and it's a really small percentage that will ever happen. Most people, well, I handled this. Well, you didn't. You stuffed your emotion down and you hold it against the person each time you see them. What am I going to do? I'm really not going to. I'll smile at them and I'll get along with them. All of this BS is at the surface, but when you get heart of it, I've been hurt. I'd like to express that. You didn't hurt me. You did this, and I told myself this. How do you see it? Let's talk about that. What was your intent in that? Then I'm getting to the heart of it, but we don't know how to do that. No one's really ever held us by the hand and walked us through it. I know no one did for me. I had to go out and learn it and practice it and get coached and come back and do it again and again and again.
I feel like you're very introspective, and I feel like you ask a lot of questions and you look for the deeper things within life, and obviously specifically with communication. It reminds me so much of myself. I want to know the deeper reasoning behind everything. I appreciate the conversation, Greg. You gave tons of value, tons of insights. If they wanted to explore your work further, where could they go?
Yeah, I have a website, alignment-resources.com. Don't forget the dash between alignment and resources. Also, you can just send me an email, greg@alignment-resources.com. You can see some of the work we do. Updating my website as we speak. A lot of changes in the last year, so I'm actually trying to work with that with my people right now. But that's the best way. I also have a podcast called A Shot of Inspiration, and Jordan's going to be on that soon as well.
Yes,
It's
sir.
inspirational stories about people I meet. And I'm also launching a second one called A Spiritual Piece. And it's like a piece of the puzzle or the piece that you feel. And that's about people's spiritual journey in life.
I absolutely love that. And yes, I cannot wait to hop on the inspirational podcast, my friend.
It'll be fun.
Yes, sir. Audience, thanks for tuning in. And until next time.
Thank you, Jordan.